Cranbrook is a city in southeastern British Columbia. It's about 6 miles or 10 kilometers southwest of the confluence of the Kootenay and St. Mary's rivers. It is the largest urban center in the East Kootenays. It's headquarters to the regional district of East Kootenay. As of 2024, Cranbrook's population was more than 21,000. Cranbrook is at the junction of major highways number 3 and 9395. Close to borders with Alberta and the United States, it is a transportation hub. Cranbrook has a Canadian Pacific Railway yard, a key gateway for trains to and from the United States. At the Canadian Museum of Rail Travel, you can see passenger rail cars built in the 1920s for the CPR and in the early 1900s for the Spokane International Railway. For millennia, the Tunuka peoples have been stewards of this land. European settlers followed, notably Colonel James Baker. Baker named his new land after his home in Cranbrook, Kent, England. In 1898, Baker had convinced the CPR to establish its Crow's Nest Pass through Cranbrook rather than nearby gold rush boomtown Fort Steele. Cranbrook flourished, Fort Steele declined, and today is a preserved heritage town. On November 1st, 1905, Cranbrook became a city. Mining has long played an essential role in its economy. Today's major industries include services for mining and forestry, the trades, healthcare, and year-round tourism. Cranbrook is a tourist destination with access to world-class golf, cycling, fishing, and skiing. It faces the Purcell Mountains to the west and the Rocky Mountains to the north and east. 2 ski resorts are nearby. Lakes offer boating, fishing, and camping. Western Financial Place is a pool and hockey arena that opened in the year 2000. It is home to the Cranbrook Bucks, who play in the British Columbia Hockey League, the BCHL. A paved 2-lane trail joins Cranbrook and Kimberley. The trail is a 28-kilometer or 17-mile section of the Trans-Canada Trail and is known as the Rails to Trails. The CPR donated the rail right-of-way. Cranbrook has a humid continental climate. Summers are warm with sunny days and cool nights. Winters are moderately cold and snowy. Cranbrook is reported to have the most sunshine hours of any BC city. It is fairly dry, but much of the precipitation falls as snow. The cold season lasts for about 3 months, mid-November to mid-February. Cranbrook has some of the lightest wind speeds and few foggy days. Cranbrook entered the age of flight with the first ever flight over the Canadian Rockies on August 2nd, 1919. Captain Ernest C. Hoy, who had served in France with the Royal Flying Corps in the First World War, had been selected for this challenge by the Vancouver branch of the Aerial League of Canada. Hoy was flying a Curtiss JN-4 called a Canuck with wartime registration C222. He had left the Minaroo Park racetrack south of Vancouver at 4:13 a.m. He headed east, making fuel stops at Vernon and Grand Forks. Hoy left Grand Forks at 11:15 a.m., following the CPR tracks eastward. After crossing Kootenay Lake, he entered the pass between Crawford Creek and St. Mary River. He reported clearing the treetops in the mountain pass by only 150 feet. Hoy landed near Cranbrook shortly after 2 p.m. He was greeted by a large crowd. After delivering letters to dignitaries from their counterparts in Vancouver, Vernon, and Grand Forks, he arranged for refueling. He took off for Lethbridge in mid-afternoon. 10 years after, in late April 1929, the Cranbrook Board of Trade was in the process of taking an option on 200 acres adjacent to the city. It proposed to develop an airport. A month later, the Superintendent of Airways Civil Aviation Branch in Ottawa flew into the proposed airfield site in a Pitcairn mail wing. Squadron leader Tudhope was known as Tuddy. Tuddy was flying from the RCAF station at High River, Alberta. After inspecting the sites between the CPR tracks and the town's golf course, Tuddy left for Grand Forks. The next day, Tuddy contacted the Board of Trade, saying he approved of the site. To get the field in shape as soon as possible, locals began clearing rocks and debris, using hand tools and a small truck. Previously, visiting aircraft either used the Cominco property at Marysville, near Wycliffe, or another location at Wausau. Cranbrook's municipal airfield was located north of the city and west of the CPR tracks. It had a single landing area, 2,600 feet by 400 feet, with an irregular surface of light sod and gravel. As noted in the 1936 edition of Airports and Established Landing Fields, a single hangar with servicing facilities was available. The field was for day use only. De Havilland Aircraft of Canada began importing a new model, the DH-80A Puss Moth, in 1930. De Havilland decided to organize a cross-Canada flight featuring the first aircraft imported from the English parent company. On July 8, 1930, serial number 4 was registered. 4 days later, company pilot Jeff O'Brien, with the de Havilland Canada's Secretary-Treasurer George Mickleborough, set off westbound. Leaving the High River Air Station, they headed for Cranbrook and landed at the new airfield. The de Havilland team put the Puss Moth through its paces, and then left for Vancouver via Grand Forks. On December 15, 1932, an A. Hawking and W. G. McLaren of Cranbrook purchased a Curtiss C-1 Robin. They operated the Robin until April 1st, 1935, when it was sold. The federal government authorized the Unemployment Relief Scheme in October 1932. Single homeless men would be hired to construct intermediate airfields on the Trans-Canada Airway. The Controller of Civil Aviation, J.A. Wilson, arrived at Cranbrook in September 1934. Wilson was inspecting the unemployment relief camps in southern BC. A large camp was established at Cranbrook to administer all the proposed airfield sites in southeastern BC, as well as Coleman and Cowley in Alberta, and to be a dispersal center for the area. The object of the program was to minimize overhead, using mostly manual labor. At the end of June 1936, the camps were closed. The Department of Transport's Civil Aviation branch took responsibility for finishing the intermediate sites. By August 1937, all work was completed. By the Second World War, Cranbrook Airport's single rectangular runway had been extended to 3,770 feet by 350 feet of turf. It was reported to be rough in all weather. The field, on the northeastern end of town, west of the CPR tracks, had its own radio range. To ferry aircraft throughout Western Canada, No. 124 Squadron RCAF at Ottawa established a Western Division in November 1942. A detachment of 124 Squadron was established at Cranbrook. An RCAF Bolingbrook photographic aircraft arrived to take aerial photos of the airfield in late September 1943. Flying Officer George Williamson landed at the grass field in an RCAF Goose aircraft in May 1944. He recalled that the single corrugated metal hangar housed several small civilian aircraft due to wartime flying restrictions. At the end of the war, Canadian Pacific Airlines started scheduled service to the airfield using Douglas DC-3s. The largest aircraft by far to touch down on the grass at Cranbrook did so on March 14, 1945. At 9 p.m., a United States Air Force B-24 Liberator was circling the city. The pilots switched their landing lights on and off, and the airport manager turned on the airfield lighting. The B-24 had taken off from Boise, Idaho, but suffered a radio and compass failure. The crew was lost in the mountains. They spotted the lights of Cranbrook and descended amid falling snow. The aircraft made several low passes over the city. At first, the crew believed the city's main street was a runway, then spotted the airfield's perimeter lighting and rotating beacon. The B-24's captain, likely anticipating obstructions over the city, came in high, landing almost halfway down the 3,770-foot grassy airstrip. The pilot applied full braking power, but was unable to stop. The aircraft overran the field into rough ground at the north end of the strip without damage. The crew walked to the airport office, saying they would stay until they received further orders. 2 days later, a USAF C-47 flew in from Spokane with a repair crew and spares for the B-24. The aircraft left on March 24th after a 10-day stay. During the B-24's stay, RCAF officials arrived in an Anson to meet with the American crew and arrange their departure. By 1955, the airport had been lengthened. The runway was now paved for 4,900 by 150 feet. In 1968, a new airport, Cranbrook Canadian Rockies International, known as YXC, opened about 9 kilometers or just under 6 miles north of Cranbrook, or 20 kilometers or 12.5 miles southeast of Kimberley. At the time, it had a single 6,000-foot paved runway. Today it has an 8,000-foot by 150-foot asphalt runway with a Category 1 instrument landing system. The terminal building covers about 23,000 square feet. It is owned by the City of Cranbrook and operated by Elevate Airports.